Round 4 of the FIDE Candidates 2026, and the pressure is mounting. Fabi no Karu na and Javokia Sindarov share the lead on 2.5 points, while everyone below them is desperate to close the gap. 3 games on the board today, 2 decisive, 1 draw. The story of the round belongs to Anish Giri, who seizes a complex Najdorf and gradually outplays Andrey Esipenko in a game full of piece sacrifices, advancing pawns, and white slowly running out of answers. Esipenko, the aggressive Russian tactician rated 2698, has struggled so far in this event, sitting on just 1 point. Giri, the Dutch Grandmaster and perennial top 10 player at 2753, also has just 1 point and desperately needs a win to stay in contention. Both players are fighting for their tournament lives here, which makes the fighting spirit in this game entirely unsurprising. The Najdorf Sicilian, arguably the most theoretically dense opening in chess history, popularized and weaponized by Bobby Fischer and Garry Kasparov, it remains Black's sharpest response to e4. Black stakes out queenside space with a6, preventing nb5 and preparing queenside counterplay, while White typically launches a kingside attack. The resulting positions are double-edged and demand precise preparation from both sides. The classical king's pawn opening, White immediately stakes a claim in the center and opens lines for the bishop and queen. At this level, e4 is a declaration of intent, inviting the sharpest possible play, and Giri strikes back immediately in the center with the Sicilian. Rather than mirror White's pawn, Black fights for d4 asymmetrically, ensuring an imbalanced struggle from the very first moves. Knight to f3. The most principled response, Esipenko develops naturally, targets the d4 square, and keeps all the mainline Sicilian options open before committing to a specific plan. Giri plays d6, the Najdorf move order begins. This modest-looking pawn move supports a future e5, keeps the c8 bishop's diagonal flexible, and signals Black's intention to head into the most theoretical territory on the board. White opens the center with d4, the standard follow-up in all open Sicilian lines. Esipenko stakes his claim to the center before Black can consolidate. Black captures, and now White recaptures with the knight, the classic Sicilian pawn trade that hands White central pawn control in exchange for Black getting the half-open c-file and dynamic counterplay. The knight recaptures on d4, occupying a powerful central post. White's knight dominates the board from here, though Black's counterplay on the queenside will make it stay temporary. Knight to f6, Giri develops with a tempo, attacking the e4 pawn and following the Najdorf blueprint. This move pressures White's center immediately and prepares Black's own development. The knight comes to c3, defending e4 and completing White's standard knight development. Both knights are now centralized, and White is ready to choose an attacking scheme. And here it is, the signature move of the Najdorf. This seemingly quiet pawn advance prevents nb5 from White for the rest of the game and prepares queenside expansion with b5. Kasparov used this move to build his entire attacking philosophy. Esipenko pins the knight on f6 with bg5, entering the classical Najdorf with the bishop pin. This is one of the most venerable attacking systems against the Najdorf, creating immediate pressure on Black's kingside and posing the famous poisoned pawn and other critical questions. Giri plays e6, breaking the pin's most dangerous implications by supporting the f6 knight and preparing to develop the dark-squared bishop. This is the most solid response, leading to the b95 variation. Rather than the traditional f4, Esipenko retreats the bishop to d3, a more positional approach that keeps the bishop active on the a2g8 diagonal and avoids the extreme theoretical complexity of the f4 lines. Black develops the bishop to e7, solid, sensible, preparing to castle kingside. Giri is not looking for complications just yet, he simply completes his development first. White places the queen on e2, connecting the rooks and clearing d1 for the rook. This is a subtle move that also supports a potential e5 push and keeps the position flexible before committing to castling. Giri takes the pawn on e4. This bold central capture begins a well-known tactical sequence. Black is inviting a piece sacrifice, trusting that the resulting complications favor the defender. Esipenko accepts the challenge and recaptures with the knight, keeping the complications alive. Both players are clearly well prepared as the position rapidly becomes double-edged. Black captures the bishop on g5, removing a key attacking piece from White's arsenal. The engine assessment remains roughly equal, confirming this is all within known theory. The knight leaps to f5 with tempo, attacking the bishop on g5 and eyeing the e7 and g7 squares. White recovers the piece and keeps the initiative. The bishop retreats to e7, stepping out of danger. Now white has an aggressive outpost knight on f5 and must decide how to continue the attack. Esipenko sacrifices the knight on g7, forcing the black king into the open. This is the critical moment of the opening phase. White gives up a piece to shatter black's kingside and deny castling forever. The engine calls this essentially equal, meaning Giri has prepared this precisely. The king steps to d7, not running away but marching toward the center, a typical Najdorf defensive resource. Black accepts the uncastled king in exchange for an extra piece. Esipenko castles kingside, getting his own king to safety while the g7 knight still looms over black's position. White has given up a piece but has a dangerous knight on g7 and active rooks about to enter the game. Knight to c6, Giri develops his last minor piece, attacks nothing but stabilizes the queenside. The engine now tips very slightly in black's favor as the extra piece begins to tell. White advances c4, trying to gain space on the queenside and restrict black's knight, but Stockfish already gives black a small edge here. This move may not be the most accurate try. The king sidesteps to c7, further centralizing and escaping any backrank threats. Black's king feels surprisingly safe tucked behind the pawn chain. The knight retreats from g7 to h5, having completed its mission of ruining black's kingside. Now white looks for a way to maintain pressure, but the engine notes black is slightly better. Giri develops the bishop to d7, connecting the rooks and preparing to centralize fully. Black's position is becoming increasingly harmonious. The rook comes to d1, centralizing and putting pressure on the d6 pawn. White tries to create counterplay, but black's coordination is superior. The rook activates on c8, controlling the open file and preparing to infiltrate. Giri methodically improves every piece before launching any decisive action. Esipenko pushes b4, gambling with a pawn advance to create counterplay on the queenside. This is double-edged, it could loosen white's structure. Giri snaps off the pawn immediately. Black now has 2 pawns for the sacrifice piece and the initiative. The engine confirms black maintains a small but stable advantage. White brings the a-rook to b1, targeting the knight on b4 and trying to regain the pawn. The rooks are finally coordinated, but black has consolidated effectively. The knight takes on d3, exchanging itself for the bishop. Black trades down material while maintaining the extra pawn, simplifying the position in a way that favors the side ahead. Esipenko recaptures with the queen, and this is where things go seriously wrong. Stockfish swings dramatically to -1.4 for white after this recapture. The queen has stepped away from an active post, and black's bishop is about to become very dangerous, a significant moment in the game. Giri responds with bishop to a4, and immediately the engine flags this as a mistake, a 2.7 swing. The bishop on a4 attacks the b1 rook, but this is not the most precise continuation. Black had better ways to convert the advantage, likely keeping the bishop more actively placed to coordinate with the advanced pawns. White brings the rook to d2, connecting the rooks and preparing to double on the b-file. Esipenko tries to maximize his rooks, but the engine still gives black over 1.5 points of advantage. The king retreats to b8, flagged as a mistake by the engine, a swing of over 3 pawns. Black's king was perfectly safe on c7, and this backward step wastes a tempo. Giri should have been more aggressive, pushing his extra pawns forward rather than shuffling the king. Both rooks double on the b-file, creating real threats against the bishop on a4 and the b7 pawn. White is maximizing the rook's activity in the absence of better options. Bishop retreats to c6. The engine marks this as another inaccuracy, a 3.5 pawn swing. Black had better options than this passive retreat. Nonetheless, black still holds a significant advantage according to Stockfish. Esipenko advances c5, trying to undermine the d6 pawn and create some counterplay. The engine gives black nearly -2.6. White's position is becoming increasingly difficult to defend. Black captures on c5, and here the engine shows a 5.5 pawn swing, flagging this as a serious error. By taking on c5, Giri opens up lines that white can use. The correct approach was likely to keep the tension rather than release it, but black's advantage remains substantial. White captures the a6 pawn with the queen, winning material back. Suddenly white has some counterplay, and the game becomes complicated again. The engine shows black still ahead by almost 3 pawns, but Esipenko is fighting hard. Giri centralizes the queen to d5, another inaccuracy. According to the engine, a 5.5 pawn swing. The queen on d5 is active, but there were more precise ways to consolidate black's advantage. The material imbalance makes calculation extremely difficult at this stage. White plays f3, trying to restrict the knight and shore up the king's position. The engine still gives black nearly 3 pawns of advantage. White is in serious trouble despite the recent material recovery. The rook lifts to c7, defending the b7 pawn and preparing to double rooks on the d-file. Another move flagged as inaccurate by the engine, a nearly 6-pawn swing, but black continues to hold a decisive advantage. The knight retreats to g3, getting off the rim and back into play. White tries to activate all pieces and create some defensive coordination. Rook to d8, connecting the rooks and preparing to activate along the d-file. The engine notes this as yet another imprecision, a nearly 6-pawn swing, but black's position remains winning by a wide margin. The knight retreats to f2, heading toward e4 to create some central pressure. Esipenko is scrambling to find any counterplay. The passed pawn advances to c4. The engine shows this as another inaccuracy, a nearly 7-pawn swing, but black's queenside pawn is now a monster. White must deal with this advancing pawn while also managing multiple threats. The knight jumps to e4, finally finding an active square and threatening to create some problems. But the engine gives black over 4 points of advantage. It is far too late for white to save the game. Giri advances f5, kicking the knight and pushing all his pawns forward simultaneously. The engine flags this as another imprecision, an 8.5-pawn swing, but with multiple connected passed pawns, black's position is objectively winning. The knight retreats to c3, forced off the e4 square. White is being pushed back on all fronts, and the pawns on c4 and f5 are becoming increasingly dangerous. Queen to c5, centralizing and adding pressure to the position. The engine flags this as another inaccuracy, a 9-pawn swing, but with the material and pawn advantage black possesses, the result should not change. White brings the rook to e2, trying to defend and create some counterplay. Esipenko is fighting to the last, but the engine gives black nearly 5 pawns of advantage. The bishop activates on f6, adding another attacker and preparing to coordinate all pieces. The engine shows this as yet another imprecision, nearly 10-pawn swing, but the position remains decisively in black's favor. The knight jumps to a4, attacking the queen and trying to create some tactical tricks. Esipenko is looking for any combination that might save the game. Giri takes the knight, flagged as an inaccuracy with a 9-pawn swing, but by giving back some material, black simplifies into a winning in-game. The bishop captures and black still has multiple passed pawns and a technically winning position. White recaptures with the queen, winning back the bishop. The material count is closer now, but black's passed pawns and active pieces give a decisive advantage of over 3 pawns. The c-pawn marches to c3, another inaccuracy, according to the engine, but the idea is clear. Push the passed pawns as far as possible and force white to deal with multiple threats simultaneously. White plays queen to c2, blockading the c3 pawn and trying to stop the advance, but black has too many threats on multiple wings. The bishop swings to g5, attacking the e2 rook and creating threats on the kingside. The engine flags yet another inaccuracy, nearly 9 pawns, but black's position remains completely winning. The king steps to f1, trying to escape any backrank tactics. White is in full defensive mode with no real winning chances. Queen to c4, pressuring the c2 queen and adding another attacking layer. Another engine-flagged inaccuracy, 9-pawn swing, but black continues to dominate the position with a 4.5-point advantage. White activates the rook with rd1, threatening to create counterplay, but the engine shows the evaluation crashing to nearly -6. This defensive try is not enough. Giri sinks the rook to d2, attacking both the queen on c2 and the rook on e2 simultaneously, a devastating double attack. The engine shows black with over 6 points of advantage, and the position is completely resignable. White captures the rook, forced to exchange. The material situation remains deeply unfavorable for Esipenko. and the c-pawn recaptures on d2, now sitting just one square from promotion on a completely open file with the rook on e2 helpless to stop it. The engine gives black over 6 points of advantage, and Esipenko will have resigned shortly. After this position, the d1 promotion threat is unstoppable. Ultimately, this game was decided by Esipenko's piece sacrifice with knight to g7, which gave black a lasting extra piece advantage that Giri, despite multiple inaccuracies along the way, was always able to maintain. The passed pawns on c and d became unstoppable, and the d2 pawns march to promotion sealed the game. Giri climbs to 2.5 points. And that is round 4 of the FIDE candidates. Giri joins Karuana and Sindarov at the top on 2.5 points, making for a fascinating three-way race at the summit. Round 5 promises more fireworks as the leaders face increasing pressure. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Giri's piece for pawns technique, and do not forget to subscribe for every round of coverage.